Welcome to Something Crunchy. Tyler is homies with Blake. Blake is the older bro of Blair. Blair is married to Tyler, and is a slutty slut.
Welcome to Something Crunchy.
What the hell is crunchy?
Welcome to Something Crunchy. Welcome to another special edition episode of Something Crunchy. I am Cullen Blake. With me, as always, Blair and Tyler Dressel. Tonight, we are talking to the Russell Schwartz. He is currently the president of the Pandemic Marketing Corporation, which provides strategic marketing, theatrical distribution, ancillary placement solutions, and digital execution for the motion picture industry. He is also the lead marketing professor at the Dodge College of Film and New Media at Chapman University, as well as a member of the faculty at the American Film Institute. From 1992 to 1999, he was president of Gramercy Pictures and oversaw the marketing of Four Weddings and a Funeral, Fargo, The Usual Suspects, The Big Lebowski, Dazed and Confused, Dead Man Walking, and several others. After that, he was president of USA Films and released such movies as Traffic, Nurse Betty, Topsy-Turvy, Being John Malkovich, and Pitch Black. Then, from 2001 to 2008, he was president of theatrical marketing at New Line Cinema, where he oversaw all of the company's marketing efforts, which resulted in over 44 Academy Award nominations and billions of box office dollars. Some of the films he managed and created marketing campaigns for included the Lord of the Rings Trilogy, Hairspray, Wedding Crashers, Elf, Rush Hour 2 and 3, The Notebook, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, About Schmidt, and many more. In 2013 and 14, he was president of worldwide marketing at Relativity Media and was responsible for the entire slate, including The Family, Don John, and Beyond the Lights. Please welcome President of Pandemic Marketing, Mr. Russell Schwartz. Thank you so much for joining us. How are you, Mr. Schwartz?
I am very good, thank you, on a Friday afternoon. Sunny Los Angeles.
So
are you guys in LA too? Are you on the West Coast?
No, we are in Phoenix, same time zone as you right now.
Okay.
So you've been spending your pandemic in LA?
Pretty much. Yeah, I didn't, between my duties at Chapman, which have been pretty interesting, teaching Zoom classes all the past year, as well as an enormous amount of faculty meetings, which somehow seem to be much longer than they were when you do them in person.
Right. So a full year of teaching over Zoom, that's got to be challenging.
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting because I actually have to, I live up in sort of northern LA area, and it takes me about an hour to drive down to Chapman. And that is nowhere near as tiring as teaching a class for 3 hours online. It's really,
I was actually going to say, only an hour commute in LA? That's not bad at all.
Well, I've arranged my classes accordingly, so I go down in the middle of the day, and I come back late at night. I can speed on the 5 coming home, so like everybody else does. So.
Well, we are passionate about both movies and marketing around here. This is a real treat for us. I certainly want to get into your career, marketing, and all of that, but let's start with your background. You obviously have a background in business, but did you grow up a movie buff at all?
I actually came to movies a little later when I was in college and right after that. One of my first jobs was I was running a movie theater in Manhattan where I grew up. I actually grew up in Queens, but lived in Manhattan during, throughout the late 70s into the 80s.
Oh, that's awesome.
That's cool.
It was a pretty cool time. It was called the Regency Theater. And this was right before the DVD craze happened, when, everything sort of went to VHS and then DVD, which is sort of like late 70s. So we had a really interesting opportunity in the mid 70s to curate a lot of movies that were sort of sitting in the studio vaults, and some of them even nitrate, which of course you're not supposed to ever show because they blow up in the theater.
Highly flammable.
But we became friendly with some of these film shippers, and between my theater, the Regency, and a theater in Boston called the Orson Welles Cinema, and another theater in San Francisco called the Surf, we sort of created festivals together that and then sort of moved the prints around from one city to the other. And it was incredibly successful. I mean, we would come up with festivals like, Murder, Mystery, Mayhem, and show all the great movies from the 30s, 40s, and 50s.
So awesome.
Yeah. And, not only was it a great experience for me as a film lover, because I ended up managing the theater and booking it, so I was there like 12 hours a day. But also being able to do all that research. And, I really just booked the movies that I didn't see. even in school. And,
That's just
it worked,
fun.
and they were very, very successful. And even after the VHS thing started happening, the theater was so well established that it had a very successful run for about 5, 6 years. And then the people who owned the theater decided they wanted to go more commercial. So I think the first movie that they took away, the first period that they showed a movie which was not a sort of a wonderful old Hollywood movie was The Exorcist. And that was it.
Yeah.
When they saw how much money they made on The Exorcist, we were toast.
You were there for the release of The Exorcist, like from a theater perspective?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So is it true what everyone says, that people were leaving the theater vomiting and running out,
Freaking
screaming
out.
in terror?
There was a lot of that,
Oh, there was a lot of that.
Really?
Linda Blair did her number. There's no
Linda
question about
Blair
it.
was
Killed it.
I mean,
No pun
like no
intended.
other.
Wow. Well, that's awesome.
Well, it was the first one, and whenever you're at the forefront of something that you create, and I don't know whether they had any idea what they had, but they certainly found out really quickly.
Yeah.
Well, that's a fun fact. So what were some of your favorite films from that era when you were working there?
Oh, it was mostly. I think I was much more into the noir movies. That was sort of where I liked. Yeah, obviously Hepburn and all that, Tracy Hepburn movies. We did a whole series on them. We played every one of them. Let's see, what else did we have? Then we did, a lot of adventure, a lot of the classics, Lawrence of Arabia. But it was just, it was a really good time. And, at that point in Manhattan, it was really interesting period. Upper West Side of Manhattan was really booming.
Such a fun
And,
place to be during that time, doing what
yeah,
you're doing.
And it was also 3 blocks from Lincoln Center, so it all sort of tied into itself.
Wow.
So fun.
Did you always want to work in show business?
No, I just sort of backed into that. I mean, back in when I graduated college, it was a philosophy major, and a friend of mine, was the one who told me about this theater, and I went and talked to the owner, and I said, "Yeah, I've got some ideas," and they said, "Let's give it a shot." And then after that ended, I ended up running a theater down on 42nd Street called the Bijou, which was a theater that played Freaks, that movie, for like a year at midnight.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Which was another whole big event. And then after that theater, and then we also played Japanese movies in the daytime and the evening, and then at midnight was always Freaks. After that theater went through its run, I actually rented I was approached by New Line Cinema. This is how far I go back with New Line. I had been approached when I was at the Regency by a producer who had this movie called Reefer Madness.
Yeah.
And
obviously we have seen Reefer Madness.
Yeah, we have obviously seen it. So I played it up at a theater up in Upper West Side Manhattan, and the people who owned that theater happened to be the owners of New Line Cinema. And once they found out the movie was in the public domain, they started releasing the movie around the country, and I also got my own copy of the print of the movie, made my own copy, and so we were sort of going. We became competitors across the whole country trying to release this one movie.
Wow.
And in order to publicize it, I actually four-walled a theater down on 8th Street in the Village called the Cinema Village. What's it called? Is it called the Astor Place, I think? And for 1 year, that movie played, and it easily became the center of dope dealing in Manhattan for the entire period.
That's awesome.
So
you couldn't go into that theater without a contact high. It's pretty funny.
So that film is what got you into the marketing industry, essentially?
Yeah, well, it got me into distribution in a way. And, I started selling it to colleges, and then, it actually did quite well. And we ended up buying some other movies, and it went from there. But that was the distribution part. And then I became friendly with a director named Peter Bogdanovich over time. And I went out to LA and met him and a couple of friends of mine. And we ended up producing a movie that he made called They All Laughed, which was with Audrey Hepburn and Ben Gazzara, John Ritter.
Wow.
And it was actually shot in New York, but I don't know if you know the story of that movie. There was a movie that was made about that movie called Star 80. Well, without getting into too much detail, Peter was having an affair with the woman who he cast in the movie, a playmate named Dorothy Stratton, playmate of the year named Stratton.
That's so funny you bring it up. We just interviewed Eric Roberts in November.
Oh, he played the role. He played the role of Paul.
Yes, he did. So we talked to him all about Star.
About that role, too.
That's right.
All right. Well, I don't have to go into the gory details because it was talking about coming into Hollywood with, it was the biggest cliche to enter Hollywood as part of a murder-suicide.
Yeah.
But it got me to LA, and Peter at that point, of course, was pretty distraught about the whole thing. So
Right.
he couldn't really do very much in terms of what our plans were in terms of production and everything. But then I met some people at Landmark Theaters, and they had known me from my Regency days because they were also running repertoire movies, and they asked me to join them, and that sort of got me into the whole distribution and marketing part.
Wow. So what
And I
was
just
your
went from
first
there.
major film that you were assigned to?
It was a re-release of Seven Samurai.
Really?
Wow.
You knew that right
I
away.
stayed
I
there.
remember
yeah,
that.
I stayed there about a year, and then there was another company that was starting called Island Alive Pictures, this is now early '80s, and this is really when the independent American cinema movement began. There was a couple of really great companies like Cinecom and Island Alive, and we were out there buying all these movies that these American filmmakers were making, and also there was a whole British wave happening, and we bought actually Spike's first movie, She's Gotta Have It, out of the San Francisco Film Festival,
Wow.
and released that, which was really a lot of fun because we released it in art theaters, and there was never a black film that was released in these sort of upscale art houses. So that was a whole interesting
Spike.
situation for a lot of people. Yeah.
That's great.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it was obviously very successful, launched his career, and it was great. And it's so amazing. 2 years ago now, there was finally a TV series called She's Gotta Have It.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like 40 years later, it's like, I don't know, whatever. Anyway, so Island Alive was a very, very successful company. I mean, we had movies like Kiss of the Spider Woman. We won William Hurt's first actor award. We did early Neil Jordan movies like Mona Lisa, Luc Besson's early film Subway. So it was all these, new filmmakers that were coming out of the UK and the US, and it was a pretty great run of movies.
Wow.
But like all companies, particularly independent companies, it sort of started careening south, and I left, and I was recruited by the original Miramax, and I worked there for 2.5 years. Yes, I worked with Harvey and Bob. I was sort of their veneer at that point. This was all pre-Disney and all before a lot of the nonsense happened with him.
Yeah, of course.
But again, that was a really successful. We had a couple of good runs there. What else did we have there? My Left Foot, The Cook, the Thief, His Wife, and His Lover, Madonna's movie Truth or Dare. I mean, it was pretty cool. And then Polygram and Universal came after me to start a company that they were doing as a JV called Gramercy Pictures. This is now the early '90s. I'll stop after this company.
No, please don't.
which was pretty fascinating because it was actually run by Universal was a Polygram was sort of a record label, right? It was a record company, and they wanted to create a co-venture with Universal, who had a lot of directors who were fostering some younger filmmakers too, like Scorsese and everybody. And this is actually what Kevin Smith came out of.
Wow.
And Polygram's whole idea behind it was to set up the company like a record label where you had individual production units sort of feeding into a centralized distribution system, which in fact was my company called Gramercy Pictures.
Okay.
So, at that point we had Propaganda, which is now called Anonymous, and Ted Field. We had Interscope
Yeah.
Pictures. Jodie Foster had a label, and Working Title was one of the big providers, and they're still very much around. And that was quite a run. That was sort of Camelot.
Yeah, you had
that
some
that
monster
90s period.
titles that came out at that period.
Yeah, it was really a great run. Even Vin Diesel's first movie.
Which was
So I
that?
can take credit
Pitch
for it.
Black, right?
Pitch Black?
Well, that was actually the second movie. His first movie was there was a Wall Street called The Boiler Room. which he
Boiler?
was doing.
That was
That
Vin
New
Diesel's
Line- that New
first
Line-
movie?
I think it was Boiler Room. Yeah.
Really? Wow.
He was
It
great
sounds
in
like,
that.
Yeah, the funnest job just ever. I mean,
Well, I guess I always liked marketing because I never had the patience to be a producer. I never had the bank account to sort of option a lot of things. So to me, what was exciting about marketing is that there was always another one coming down the pike, right? And you could be juggling, 4 or 5 movies at a time, and it was always exciting.
yeah, and you
And
can
of
use your
course-
creativity.
When it comes to
Yeah,
the
right.
marketability of a film, is it more about the story, the stars? What is it that excites you?
Well, it's really in this world of independent cinema, which is where I grew up. It was really about, is there an original idea here? The stars are never a drivers of independent movies. It's really about what, is it a unique storyline?
Sure.
Is there something buzzy about it? And that's still,
Originality.
that still holds right now.
Absolutely, it
The
does.
A24 successes, the Focus successes, they're all about originality, original
Yeah.
content.
More now than ever. So when your involvement first begins, what stage of the production is the film in?
Well, at Gramercy, it was really a start of production because we were involved pretty early on, since these were all, basically production companies. So, we didn't really have, green light. We didn't have really red light either. We couldn't stop a movie from being made. But, my job really was to my job is really to sort of speak to all the heads of these, these fiercely independent labels and sort of get into, who's the audience and how are we going to sell this and what can we do about it. So
Sure.
it was all very, above board. And, the legendary battles between marketing and production that happened so much in the studios where they don't talk to each other, they're all siloed. That didn't happen in this company because everybody knew that what they were trying was something really unique. And, and we had to really work together from the very, very beginning to try to exploit the movies or find, something inside the films to really make them work. At the same time, Joel and Ethan Coen make Fargo, and what are you going to do? It's okay.
Oh,
Looks great.
yeah. Yeah.
But of course, then the head of the company, Polygram, says, well, we have to test the movie. I say, well, Joel and Ethan have never gone to a research screening of any of their movies.
So
I said, well, let's just do it anyway.
So they didn't think it was a slam dunk right away? They still thought?
No, not at all. Nobody did.
Really?
Wow.
And I was sort of, I loved the movie, but you never know, right?
Oh, love it.
I understand
So-
that you had a big hand in the design for the poster, which of course then evolved and became basically the whole theme for the poster series of the
Yeah, it was
TV
sort of
show.
amazing. I'll get to that in a second. So anyway, the funny thing is that the Coens, of course, refused to go to the screening. They just didn't need it. They did Blood Simple. They didn't need it. So we had the screening, and it was the, when you have a research screening, audiences fill out boxes and recommend, not recommend, whatever. It was the lowest scoring movie I've ever had.
No
Okay.
way. I refuse to
Fargo.
believe that.
No, it's true, because when you don't set up an audience, even though this was a curated audience of art film lovers, but when they don't get the the validation from critics or film festivals, and even back then, they didn't quite know what to say. So, and this was really early on in the movie, and it scored like, if an average movie for a research screening is like a 70, 75, it's at a 20.
Oh,
What?
In the top two
Wow.
boxes.
Wow.
But we said, okay, we'll just charge ahead, and we did the whole platform classic release, and of course the rest was history.
I'm
Once the
upset.
film was discovered and written about. I remember there's one funny story with them. The one of our copy line, which actually is the same line in the very beginning of the movie, it says this is based on a true story, right?
Yeah.
Or true events. I think. So of course there was an intrepid reporter out of Minneapolis, who went on a tear for months to try to find out where this story
Oh,
came from.
no.
So, he's about to break this great news, a week before we're supposed to open. This movie's alive, right? So he calls us and he said, you know that there is no documented evidence that this case ever happened, and you're saying it did. I said, well, you better why don't you speak to Joel about that?
Wow.
Yeah.
So,
Let's
so
just
you're
get
saying
Joel
you
a call. I'm
believe
putting out of
everything
it,
you
we
see
just-
in movies. That's amazing.
Yeah. So he calls up Joel, and Joel does his wonderful pregnant pause when the guy said to him, this is not true. Pregnant pause says, really, it's not?
What? No.
It's not.
Hi, this is a film. How are you?
Yeah. Anyway, they're so great about that. So anyway, that was a fun period. And Four Letters in a Funeral with Hugh Grant's first movie up to Sundance of all places. Who would take a British romantic comedy to Sundance when we did?
Oh, fun.
I would think that some are far easier than others. Do you have any examples
Yeah.
of movies that you felt a lot of pressure to succeed, but just didn't think it would? Maybe the playability versus marketability factor.
Well, in the independent world, you never know what's marketable, but you certainly find out what's playable. And yes, you're right. You don't need one without the other, but marketability is certainly a much easier way, which is why the studios, do what they do and do it so well.
Yeah.
Go with IP and stay in that world. independent, you've got to find something that makes the movie important or click or, like I said, buzzy.
Right.
Sure.
So I think every independent movie is a challenge. I've never really had, even Lord of the Rings was a huge challenge, but we get to that if you want.
No,
but all these movies, I mean,
I need an explanation as to how that seems like it went into it with just a plan for success.
No, not quite.
And by that I mean that they were going to go with a trilogy, and that they knew that they had like something huge already and well
to the
tested.
masses.
Yeah.
It was like going to be automatic love.
Interesting you say that, but I mean they sort of believed it, but it's not quite the way it worked out. First of all, nobody has ever, and still hasn't since, made 3 movies in a row back to back, without seeing how the first one did. That includes Pirates of the Caribbean. Once that first one came out, they made 12 other ones.
Right. Yeah.
19 Avatars coming, but
yeah,
never
that's what I was
did
going to
it.
say. Is we know it's going to happen with Avatar, but
That's a lot of faith
happened.
and money to spend to
Wow.
not know exactly how it's going to turn out.
And a lot of technology and a huge cast.
Yeah. Well, but the word on Hollywood with this trilogy was that it was going to be fail, because there was no way to guarantee what would happen if the first one didn't work. I mean, New Line would at that point had about $250 million into it, and this is back in the late '90s. It's going to go under and be absorbed by Warner Brothers, and that would be the end of it. I had just gotten there, so I had a 3-year deal. I said, "Oh, well, okay, that'll be quick."
And
anyway,
it was your job to make it a success.
Yeah, that's some pressure.
Well, it was interesting. Peter was a very, very particular filmmaker, and when you look back on it, you think about it. Peter came out of the horror world, right? He was a B director. He made movies like Brain Dead for Universal and things like that. And nobody in the movie was known outside of Ian McKellen to some extent. And it was everything about that movie which said B. The director, the cast, all unknowns. The effects were all unknown. Nobody knew anything about the effects. New Zealand, where the heck is that? Matter of fact, the first day I got my job, which I think was beginning of June in that year, 2001. The head of New Line, Bob Shea, said, "Don't go to the office. Go to the Van Nuys Airport and get on my plane."
What?
I said, "He said, where are we going?" He said, "We're going to New Zealand." So he's
So you went to New Zealand?
And I had like everybody in high school had bought the books but never read them, right?
Right.
It was just a cool thing to have on your shelf.
Yeah, you just have to have it on your desk.
Yeah, exactly. So I realized, holy shit, I'm going to meet Peter Jackson. I haven't read Fellowship yet. So the good news about it, private jet, is that it took like 18 hours to get there. So I was able to read the whole thing.
Nice.
And came up with a marketing plan, and we met Peter, and it all worked out from there. But
at least it was fresh, fresh in your mind. Like you knew all the details.
Yeah, I know exactly where I was. I know everything. I mean, even I didn't retain everything, but I retained most. And also, there was a campaign that was executed before I got there, which he was not happy with. So I think he was sort of hoping that I would come up with something halfway decent that he could accept, and then go from there. But again, it was not considered a slam dunk. I mean, we started doing research early on, and the only people who were really aware of the movie were like 50-year-old men. There was no female interest. There was no female interest. There was very little interest. I think 20% awareness of even the books in America.
Wow.
But New Line, unbeknownst to a lot of people, is a company that for those during that period specialized in foreign pre-sales. And they had developed a lot of relationships with companies who were independent distributors in various countries, UK, France, Germany, whatever.
Oh, okay.
And they all contributed a piece of the budget. So in reality, of the $250 million, it was around 80% of it was covered by European and international sales.
Wow.
And that was mostly because the books were so popular overseas, much more popular overseas than they were here. So, nobody really wanted to pay attention to that, but I mean, from a financial standpoint, they were pretty safe with it.
Yeah.
Except, of course, when I presented them an $80 million budget to market the movie.
Wow. And did you take any issue with the length?
The length?
Yes, the length
of the movie.
I don't. It wasn't a conversation that I had. I mean, there was some conversation, but I think Peter, he was part of that process, and New Line was part of the process. But I think Peter ultimately made his own decisions.
Wow.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of reshoots. There was a lot of additional photography. I mean, those movies were works in progress for a long time.
I can't even imagine.
So 2 things happened after, I came back. we started working on the campaign all summer. We started putting out trailers. I mean, my first question was, how do I sell these characters? I mean, what's a Frodo? Nobody had any idea what a Frodo was.
What's a Frodo?
Was it a frog? Was it a cake? I mean, who knows? So we had to create, actually, and at this point, cable television was a big deal at that point. So we created 1 minute sort of mini movies about each character and what their journey was.
Oh, smart.
And then we sort of a long teaser campaign that we built over the summer so people could at least understand what the characters were. And then in September, we started bringing in the storyline. And then by November, it all came together. But it was a long, long, long campaign.
It sure was.
But-
I remember being on the consumer end of that campaign, and I saw Lord of the Rings trailers for a year before that movie came out.
It's about that, yeah.
It seemed like it was out for, it was the longest amount of trailers that I saw before the actual release came out.
It's interesting hearing that side, though, that it was like specifically thought out where you can kind of at least learn part of the characters, part of the story, so you at least sort of understand what you're going to go in. Yeah, what is this?
And the scary thing is that movie premiered this year, 20 years ago.
20.
I know.
That was 20 years
20th
ago?
anniversary.
Damn.
Well, so that brings me to the second part of the interesting thing about this movie. So the first big event that happened, of course, was 9/11, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
That year.
That year.
20th anniversary for 9/11 too this year.
It's going to present a challenge.
And,
right?
the country was obviously went through in shock, denial,
Yeah.
everything, fear, all that. And, there was something about when Lord of the Rings came out, which was even 4 months later. I mean, that movie was all about hope, right? And it was all about a journey, and it's all about. And actually, it was sort of a religious saga. I mean,
Sure.
J.R. Tolkien was extremely religious. Him and his best friend, who wrote, what's the other guy's name? I forgot his name. Anyway, it was really adopted and joined by the Christian and Catholic groups in this country. They sort of looked at Frodo carrying the ring as, akin to the metaphor of Jesus and the cross. So,
Fair enough.
but that aside, that we sort of found that audience on its own. We didn't obviously sell to that initially, but there were so many things that were going on about, battling evil and, everything that Lord of the Rings stood for. That movie was the perfect anecdote to what had happened.
It was just such a story and a universe to kind of get involved in. A lot of characters and really the technology. Like it was the Avatar of that time. It was the Matrix of that time.
There was a
It took it to
of
the next
people
level.
that followed it too. Like there was like many people that all joined too that all, like just loved it so much.
But still, before we opened, we didn't quite know what we had. I mean, it was still being referred to as a very expensive art movie. Because, again, nobody was in it. Peter was unknown, et cetera, et cetera. And then, of course, there was this looming movie called Harry Potter, which was opening about a month before from Warner Brothers, our sister company, that was going to decimate, not only every other thing at the box office, but our movie as well, which is what everybody was expecting was going to happen. There's no way that two huge movies like this, Lord of the Rings became known as the F movie, the F word movie. And when you're doing an Academy campaign, fantasy is the dreaded word because no fantasy has ever won or been nominated, right?
That makes sense.
That was a whole other thing,
Especially
too,
by
so.
that time.
Yeah. So for Harry Potter, it wasn't really an issue because they didn't really, other than effects and everything. But that movie did not get very good reviews. I mean, it did obviously phenomenal business. But it did not get very good reviews. And there was something about the air that when people started screening our movie, Lord of the Rings, all of a sudden the critics just loved it. Now, maybe they were the high school kids who actually read the book.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Could have been.
That's
I
exactly
think about
what
it now,
is.
right?
No doubt about
and
it.
Peter being sort of a nerd at that point, and probably still is in many ways.
Right.
They all identified with him, and
yeah.
there was obviously a much more male-dominated critical world at that point than there is right now. Thank God.
Yeah.
Well, I'm happy that's all evolved. But
Absolutely.
Still, even
There
then,
was a lot of girls that got really into Lord of the Rings.
after the first one opened,
Yeah.
Yeah.
when
After
they
the
discovered
first one,
Aragon,
Yeah.
after they discovered
Legolas.
Legolas.
Yeah.
Anyway, Orlando, yeah. Anyway, so it was actually a real surprise. I mean, that it did what it did. I mean, we sort of smelled it coming, like a month out.
I'm sure.
But this was a movie that every studio would have tested, to the nth degree. Every TV spot would have been tested. Every trailer would have been tested. The movie would have been tested. Endless arguments with Peter about editing and cutting and this and that. But we didn't, he had control, and we didn't actually test one TV spot or one trailer because we were so scared that this would get out. And we didn't test the movie particularly because we were afraid it would get out, even if we went to some, smaller area, like wherever in Colorado or Arizona at that point. So we never tested the movie. So again, it was total, the whole thing was just totally
see how this does.
built on faith.
Yeah,
it really was. It was all on faith. And yeah, the second and third one were a little bit easier. Yeah,
I'm sure
after all that.
Well, so the Lord of the Rings trilogy, Fargo. What other films do you look back and just take tremendous pride for having influence?
Well, the New Line years were pretty great. I mean,
Yeah.
I think Elf, which was obviously is now an evergreen picture. Again, what New Line was so good at was finding talent. Jim Carrey, Will Ferrell,
Wedding Crashers,
all these people, even Austin Powers. They were sort of on the cusp, but they hadn't really made it yet. And sort of getting them at a point where they were just about to break, which was great for me because they did all the publicity I asked them to.
Yeah,
because they didn't know any better.
They were in these huge big shots. They didn't know better. That's great.
Yeah, the managers and the agents were saying, "I don't think we're going to do that show." So and again, New Line was great at that. Of course, they didn't necessarily stay with New Line afterward. They sort of moved on to bigger, better paydays. But this was. Elf was that version, and even Wedding Crashers, was an interesting movie to sell because it was a great cast, obviously, and a great director, David Dobkin. But the movie was supposed to be about a bunch of guys going to weddings to get laid, right? That's sort of what the movie is.
That's the premise.
And that's the premise. That's sort of why they made it. And what happened with this is that every TV spot or every trailer that we created tested so much better for women than men that we were driving ourselves crazy.
What? Really?
I was sort of secretly liking the idea, but I was getting hammered by the president of the company and by the director and the production executives. Why can't you create a trailer that goes to the audience that we made the movie for? And it turned out that that's not who the movie was for. The movie was for women.
Wow, that's surprising.
And women love it. It's true.
Yeah, it ultimately played about 55% female and 45% male.
At the end of the day, it's a romantic comedy. It is a rom-com.
Yeah, it is a romantic comedy, and great, handsome guys. Great romance, and some amazing performances by these women.
Yeah,
particularly Isla Fisher.
Yes, absolutely.
Good comedy.
Made a name for herself in that one.
Yeah.
She skyrocketed after that. Well, do your students ever ask about any particular films?
Well, now here I am. I'm now into Gen Z, right? I'm sort of the millennials are sort of moving on. And now I'm into the Gen Z. So my first day of class I said, how many kids have seen Lord of the Rings? And I get blank stares.
You're kidding me.
No.
It's horrible. It's horrible.
No.
There's a couple of film nuts who raise their hand all happily. Tell us stories, Professor.
So this is like a historical film now?
Oh my God.
20 years ago?
I think it is. Well, most college students haven't seen anything before 2000 anyway.
So what films are they bringing up? What
are they loving right now?
Well, whatever's contemporary, whatever that's what's relevant to them, not that film students don't have an appreciation for some, for art movies and such like movies, but again, it's the relevant ones. They don't go back. And yes, we have film history classes, and they do get to see some of them. It's all that, but I mean, the Lord of the Rings thing started happening about 2 years ago.
Oh my God!
About half the class had never seen it. I said, not even on DVD. I said, well, my sister saw it. I didn't really see it. My older sister saw it.
I'm shocked to hear that. I'm beyond shocked to hear that.
I'm a little upset.
Yeah,
me too.
Not even a huge Lord of the Rings fan, but I'm just like, I feel obligated to defend it.
We grew up differently and loved older movies than we were. Like, my favorite movie, even as a young child, was Bonnie and Clyde.
Always. Yeah, of course.
And always has been. It's like just movies that, you gotta just go back. And Lord of the Rings, that was not even that long ago. I understand 20 years, but I mean,
I know. Anyway, you got to roll with it. But I managed to get a couple of stories, and then But once I get to Travolta stories on Hairspray, then I get really excited. So
Oh, love that.
Well, if we're on the subject of contemporary movies, have you seen anything recently? It's award season. Have you seen anything this year that you really liked?
Well, I think there's a lot of really good movies. I mean, I think, again, with my focus on originality as sort of something that helps break out, I think Promising Young Woman is
So happy to
it's
hear
because
you
it's
say
so
that.
daring.
We
And
completely
a lot of
agree.
people,
It was daring, especially the ending. I love hearing you say that.
and it's interesting. I don't know many women who like that movie at all, which I'm really surprised at.
Oh, I
Blair?
I don't
definitely
know whether you
enjoyed
did.
it.
Consensus?
All right, well, great. Yeah, I
We
mean,
got
I think.
one.
Yeah, our mom enjoyed it too.
Yeah, our mom did
Yeah.
enjoy it. She was the one
All
that
right,
told
well,
me
you
to make
special
sure
family,
I watched
obviously.
Yeah.
Special's one way to describe us.
We've been called a lot of things. Specials.
You're sweet.
Top of the list.
You were raised by good parents.
Yeah, that's a soundbite we're gonna keep.
You know, I think Minari, Nomadland. I mean, all the other ones. I wasn't a big fan of Mank, but you know, that's just me.
Yeah, I wasn't either, and I was really into Minari until I wasn't, and it just kind of I didn't like the ending, and I liked the first 45 minutes of Minari. I thought that was really good.
Well, to me, it's a difficult year. I mean,
It was
I
a
think,
difficult year. Judas and the Black Messiah, I thought was good.
Yeah, so did I.
I
I
thought-
like that too.
Yeah, that was good. Very well acted and well put together.
Yeah, he's great, Daniel
Good
Kaluuya.
Lord, is
Yeah,
he
so
great?
good.
Wow, very, very.
But you know, if you think about, if you want to talk about the Academy for a second, there is something interesting I think is going on. You know, a lot of smaller movies got nominated this year because those are the only ones that were released, right?
Yep.
However, you know, the Academy over the past 3 years has made a very, very strong diversity push, right?
Yeah.
And they've gone from maybe 7,000 members, which were basically, you know, all Hollywood, average age 62, and they've now added another 3,000 international, diverse, you know, young filmmakers. So it's a much more, whatever you want to call it, democratic makeup. Which they were very, very careful about that because they got nailed a couple of years ago.
For
Yeah.
I think you
sure.
remember hashtag Oscar so white, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
So
I do remember that.
they worked on that, you know. But I think what's happened now is that all these new members, as well as the older ones who are starting to die off or become non-voting members, you know, they're into a smaller, more unique kind of movie. So I don't think that the Academy movies will, even when the studios start releasing again, that the Academy Best Picture nominees will be any different than what we're seeing this year, because the people who are now voting are the people who really have been supporting smaller indie movies since, you know, forever.
So that's why
You know,
all the Best
who's
Picture nominees.
Who's Boone John Hogan to not, you know, vote for next year?
Right.
It's not going to be. I mean, it might be Tenet, but not necessarily. He's not going to vote for Wonder Woman. You know,
Right.
That's
I mean,
true.
not that I mean to speak for him, of course, but maybe he will. I don't know.
Oh, that's cool
Anyway,
to hear about how they're kind of restructuring things and adding new members.
No, it's all that's all great, but
Diversify.
I think, you know, but of course, I think on the other side, I think the ratings are going to continue to go down because a lot of the
Yeah.
people will not have seen these movies, and certainly that's not this.
Yes.
Yes.
No, they were not
The
easy
lineup.
to find.
I remember when Blake first told me the lineup, I was like, huh, I don't know. I think I've heard of one.
Yeah, like you've heard just a
Yeah,
couple.
exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I had to dig and like look to find these movies, and they were.
It opens me up to watching those movies because that
They're very indie.
introduces me to them. But
There was definitely a
it's
vibe.
different year for
Yeah.
sure.
Well, we have a lot
Yeah.
of young filmmakers in our audience, and we have several that come on as guests. What advice do you give the next generation of filmmakers when it comes to making a marketable film?
Well, I think it always comes down to making sure you know who you're making it for. You know, if you can't really figure out who your audience is even before you start writing a script, then you're in the wrong business, because that's really what it comes down to. You know, you got to know who you want to make the movie for, and then of course the whole issue of marketing is how you're going to find that audience. But again, you know, with the advent of social now, there's so much that you can do even during production that starts building a community and, you know, fan base and,
Yeah.
you know, around the movie base, whether it's a theme or whatever. But again, you know, also I think the whole distribution of movies is going to change. I mean, I don't know whether I'm sure the theaters will make a big comeback with their tentpoles. I don't know really how the independents are going to survive.
That's what I was going to ask you next, actually. With the rise of streaming platforms, do you expect to see more of like a change in theatrical releases and the way big budget films will at least be distributed?
I don't think the tentpoles are what going to keep the movie business alive, and I think the exhibition business alive. And as well they should, because I think they're great events that happen in the movie theater. They may not be five shows a day. They may go more to a Broadway formula, maybe an afternoon show and an evening show. I don't know.
I can see
There's
that.
probably too many movie theaters anyway. There's 40,000 movie theaters in America right now. I'm sure 10,000 could go away and no one would know the difference. But the real issue is what happens. How do independent movies, besides the ones that get released for Academy consideration in the fourth quarter, how do these other movies get seen? And I think there's got to be more of a symbiosis between the distributors and the exhibitors, where there's much more of a revenue share and they cross promote together, and even the streamers. These movies are going right to a streaming place. They got to kick in on the marketing budget. They can't just not do it because they should get a piece of the theatrical.
Is that how?
I think if they can come together, I mean, who knows if they will? I don't know whether Netflix needs anybody really, but
is that how HBO Max is getting all these deals that are movies coming out straight to theater, but also HBO Max at the same time?
Well, they've got. I don't think I'm not sure if it's a revenue share, but it's certainly a lot of negotiation that went on over the summer when they made that announcement. But it's probably helping HBO. But again, I'm thinking it's more about based on performance, which means that the streamers have to give up their viewing numbers, which they've been very, very loath to do.
Sure.
They were all trying to protect, how many people are seeing it, because for that very reason, if a theatrical movie on first run does extraordinarily well, then the talent's going to be saying, well, I want some of that. Why aren't we getting paid for that? So there's a lot to work out over the next year or two, I think.
Yeah.
So I don't think the theatrical business is going away at all. I just
good to hear.
It's the independents which are going to have to do some heavy soul searching. Yeah.
Does the content dictate whether a film is best for streaming or theatrical release? Is it the budget? What kind of determines that, you think?
Well, look, you guys know what kind of movies you go see. You go see anything with a big IP. Any movie that has a big effects, big budget, known characters, and known sourcing IP, Marvel Universe, whatever.
Us so well.
Yeah.
or if it's a horror movie, you can want to go see it with an audience, so everybody can scream and yell together. If it's a comedy, you want to go see it with a big audience. The comedies probably could play either also just as well, at home. But it's those dramas, it's the more character-based movies, which is what I mean. Look, think even Promising Young Woman. Do you have to see that in a movie theater?
No, you don't.
Minari, no.
No, yeah, No Man's Land. Yeah, any of these.
The only thing about No Man's Land is that it's so beautifully shot that I would have liked to have seen that on the CinemaScope screen.
Yeah, it would look beautiful.
Because the way it would look. Yeah.
I love Frances McDormand. I can't get behind that movie. I wanted to get into it. I knew it had the best picture buzz behind it. I had to see it, and I didn't love it. Like I'm more Promising Young Woman just for originality.
Mm-hmm.
And
did you see one of her earlier movies called The Rider?
No.
Recommend it. Go see that. You'll understand where she comes from. There was a very small movie that was released by I think Sony Classics, and it's about a young rodeo rider who is severely injured and how he tries to bring his life back together. And it's all done with the real people, the real family.
Whoa,
but you don't really know that they're acting until you find that out later.
Oh my god!
When you do the research, I mean, it's beautiful. It's a beautiful movie.
Cool.
But again,
The Writer.
It's very small.
R-I-D-E-R, Writer. Okay.
Yeah, The Writer. Yeah, it's very small, but it takes its time. Like she's not a fast cutter.
No,
a lot of it are.
A lot of it.
Yeah. But anyway, if you see that, I think you might have more of an appreciation for what she's trying to say in No Man's Land. But I agree, it's not a commercial movie.
Well, I appreciate that, and thank you very much for the recommendation. So tell us about your book, The Marketing Edge for Filmmakers.
When you're in the business as long as you have, as I've been in, I've really gotten into the teaching thing. It's a lot of fun. I mean, but the book was sort of I better put it down before I forget it, right?
Yeah. You've learned a lot and it's been a big part of the industry.
Yeah, and I felt it would have some value to students. I mean, the good thing about marketing, at least, the basic marketing, is that it really hasn't changed. It's all about, like I mentioned earlier, it's about understanding your audience, finding your audience.
Yep.
How do you get your audience engaged? And what's changed now, of course, are the platforms and the ways of doing it. But it's still the basic thing of getting an audience excited, either to come to a theater or now to turn on a show. And what's the campaign look like? What's the trailer look like? What's the poster look like? Same driving elements that have been around for 100 years.
Wow.
Just in different places, right? so the book is a combination of, a lot that I learned, through my career, as well as, we devote a little time at the end to how to do it yourself, because that's becoming an even bigger thing, probably even more so now, what DIY marketing and distribution is about. But I do not force my students to buy it. I feel really guilty because it costs like $35. I really do. I'm actually giving away more books than I should.
Well, I saw it's available on Amazon and it's in the Student Filmmakers store. Are those the best places to get our hands on it for $35?
Yeah, unless I can send you one. I've got a couple on my shelf right here.
Please.
No, we will take you up on that. We will take you up on that.
Maybe Amanda will give me the address.
Done. Consider it done.
Yes, because I am actually dying to read this book. Like, I feel like, again, this has been just like, what a fun jog career. We've grown up loving films, so I can imagine in marketing, loving that creative side, and even what you've said now, I would love to learn more.
I watched and completely enjoyed your master class. The marketing.
Oh yeah, that was the co-op one, the Sundance one.
That's right, the Sundance one. It's still available, and it's like really a fantastic resource if you're a filmmaker.
It's a bit about the book. Yeah, well, thank you for that. I appreciate it. I didn't have any idea what I was getting myself into. It was like they told me like 1,800 people tuned in, but you can't see any of them.
So that had to be challenging. It was really interesting. You did not have to be a filmmaker at all. You could just be interested in filmmaking, like we are. So I definitely wanted to share that to our listeners as well, because that was
thank you for that.
Really good resource.
Yeah, the book covers a lot of that. So just perhaps in more detail, but it's not really a textbook. It's much more anecdotal. Not that I get into too many stories, because the woman I wrote it with is still working very much in the film industry right now. So she kept on saying, "You can't tell that story, Russell, because I'm going to get fired." So we came up with an uneasy piece about that. But there's some funny stories. I remember when at New Line, the head of the New Line was Bob Shea, who was an amazing indie entrepreneur, the guy, just great, but very, very volatile and all that. And he had, how important now outdoor advertising is, for example, right?
Yes, of course.
With billboards, particularly with family movies, animated films, but now even Netflix and HBO have taken over pretty much every billboard in town because they're all advertising their programs. Yep. So, but outdoor was never the province of independence, because it was always an additional budget item, and if you didn't have the money, that would be the first thing to go, because you never really could quantify it. But as a media, it's really just about another place to be reminded that the movie's coming, or that the movie's coming out. And also, you sort of have a little bit of a ownership of your audience at a traffic light. And there's not too many other competing billboards out there about movies, and you sort of own them for 30 seconds. Right. Anyway, so certainly on the movies that we had, where Elf was a really, really big, important outdoor campaign. I don't know if you remember the posters that we did.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It was him sort of bursting. Yeah. It was him bursting out of the confines of the billboard. But my guy hated outdoor. He thought it was just a complete waste of money. So normally, when you're a marketing guy for a studio, you make sure that you buy the outdoor that is on the same drive that your boss is when he goes home. Right?
I'm going to make sure you see this.
So you have to make, and this would also be for the star necessarily, if you find out where they lived, or the agent or the manager. Just make sure that they see the billboards when they're on the driving home. My guy hated billboards so much, I had to actually have billboards going the opposite direction from his drive.
Do not put it on my side.
I know. So I thought I had to sort of hide the posters from where he was going. So, it's sort of funny. It was a running joke at New Line.
Well, real quick before we let you go, I understand that your company, Pandemic Marketing, has been around for like 10 years now, and it just became a coincidence last year with the name. And is it true that you have the California plates that say Pandemic?
Wow.
I do. PANDMIC. As a matter of fact, last March or April when, look, the reason I came up with the name, and it was just sort of flip, was I figured, pandemic is about affecting a lot of people very quickly, which is sort of what marketing was, right? So it sort of fits. Anyway, but when the pandemic hit, all of a sudden I'd be in a parking lot at Ralph's or something, and people come up to me and say, "Are you a doctor?" Are you a biophysicist?
Oh no!
I mean, if I was I could have made a lot of money.
Serious questions about the virus.
President of Pandemic Marketing.
I could have made a lot of money being, setting up shop in a Kmart parking lot or Walmart parking lot, just giving advice. I could.
I'm not a doctor.
Anyway, I
still
get a lot of thumbs up, and the only danger about that license plate is I keep getting tailgated all the time because people want to take a picture of it.
I can't imagine.
You really are good at marketing, aren't you?
That is too funny.
Anyway, it's just sorry. Yeah.
Well, you have been just such an awesome guest, Mr. Schwartz. We really do appreciate you coming on and joining us.
All right. Well, I look forward to good luck with it, and good luck with the show. I felt like you're having a lot of fun doing it yourselves.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much. Can't thank you enough for your time, and hopefully we get the chance to talk again in the future.
Okay, great.
Thank you again.
Thanks, sir.
All right. Bye.
Take care.
Bye. Okay.
Impressive.
Man.
Impressive guest.
He's cool.
Another industry big shot here on the Crunchcast. God, that's a cool job.
So cool.
We've had some awesome people on from the filmmaking standpoint, actors, people in front of the camera, people behind the camera, but no one from marketing. And that really just it's a scratch I had.
Drives the ship.
That was good. That was really cool. And we got some really fun episodes on deck. The deadline to enter for the 80/80 Dream Car giveaway number 44 for a McLaren 600 LT plus $60,000 in cash is coming up on May 2nd. For a limited time, they're offering double the entries, meaning every dollar you spend now gives you not one, but 2 entries. You should be shopping here anyway. 80/80 was one of our favorite brands before we were in cahoots. But the fact that you could actually win cash in cars for shopping there, it is a big pile of no-brainer. So is visiting somethincrunchy.com, where you will find every episode, our links for social media, and the almighty Crunch Store, where you will find all kinds of crunchy gear showing that you are a proud citizen of Crunch Nation. Don't hesitate to walk through the beaded curtain and check out the Something Crunchy Facebook group, where you'll have so much fun you'll need a shower after.
Adults only.
This has been another episode of Something Crunchy, and as always, don't ever forget to live your crunchiest life.
And be crunchy to one another.
Please don't forget to subscribe, like, follow, and all that crunchy good shit. Thank you for listening.
Yeah, that's a soundbite we're going to keep.